Hi everyone, this is a tutorial to demonstrate how to embroider inlay knitting onto a piece of stockinette fabric. So inlay knitting is a technique where essentially you have strands of a contrast colour yarn essentially sitting on top of, in front of stockinette stitches. Which creates this really lovely effect that you can see here. Now, inlay knitting can be worked as you knit. I've got tutorials available on YouTube for that already, but you can also embroider it onto a piece of stockinette fabric after you've finished knitting the piece. The reason you might want to do that is because, for example, in this one, there are 3 panels of inlay knitting. One down the front and then one down each shoulder. And for each of those inlay panels, you need a separate strand of this contrast colour to be worked. And that means you'd have your main colour yarn plus 3 balls of the contrast colour all attached to your work at once, which can get a little bit messy and a bit tangled up sometimes. So you might decide to embroider the inlay knitting on afterwards, just to reduce the number of kind of yarns that you're juggling as you work. So here, as you can see, I've already worked this shoulder panel, but on the other side, I've got a shoulder panel that is waiting for its inlay knitting to be added. And I'm going to show you how to do that now. So I've got the length required of my contrast colour attached to a tapestry needle. So we're ready to go. So I've identified here where my inlay knitting pattern is starting from, and then I'm going to really take my time on this first row to make sure that I am definitely following one row of stockinette, not accidentally going up or down a row, so that the inlay knitting pattern is perfectly horizontal against this piece of stockinette. So here I want this strand to go across 2 stitches. So from where the strand has come through to the right side, I'm going to count 1, there's the first stitch, 2, and then I'm going to go behind that second stitch back to the wrong side. And then pull it through. Now when you pull it, you just want the tension to be snug against the surface of the fabric, but not tight at all. The lovely thing about inlay knitting is that you can make adjustments as you're working. So I tend to err on the side of looseness to start with, and then if you need to tighten it up a little bit, you can later. But equally, if you find that you've gone a little bit too tight, you can make adjustments. So now I want my contrast colour to be on the wrong side for 1 stitch. So I'm going to just trace that stitch, and then that's the hole where I want to come back to the right side again. Oops, sorry. So I'm going to go to the wrong side, find that space that I've just identified, and then pull the yarn through again. And you're just going to keep working that first row until you've completed it, and then you'll start the next row after that, but I'll show you all the time. What you want to be doing is making sure you're just following that strand of the main colour, making sure that you are following those stitches in one straight row, one straight line, not accidentally going up or down. Especially if, as you're holding the fabric, it can be easy for your fingers to distort and make things look as if it's going wonky. But if you follow the stitches rather than kind of what your eye is telling you, then you shouldn't go too far wrong with that. Okay, so now I'm starting the second row, using that first row as a guide to help make sure I keep working in a straight line. Now here, the first row you've worked, as you're looking at it, from the right to the left. The second row will be worked from the left to the right. This means that you've only got a short float on the wrong side, moving from the first row to the second row. And obviously if you were working right to left every time, you'd have huge strands at the back of your work, which you don't really want. Okay, so I've got the first repetition of the pattern completed. I'm just going to continue to work in the same way down the remainder of this shoulder. Once I've finished, I'll just cut the yarn if I need to, leaving a tail of about 6 inches to weave in at this end as well. So as I mentioned already, I think the key is to get that first line straight along one row of stockinette. Once you've got that one done, you can then use that as a guide to continue the remainder of the pattern, and keep your tension quite loose so that the strands, are sitting quite, you can see, quite snugly against the surface of the stockinette fabric. You don't want any puckering or tightness, so if it gets a little bit tight, you can just pull that strand back to make sure it can still sit nice and flat and comfortably. All right, so that is embroidering inlay knitting onto a stockinette fabric. I hope it helps.